Good afternoon, everyone. I am holding up a copy of Striking Range by Margaret Mizushima, which is her new Timber Creek K9 mystery. I am not holding up a copy of Canyonlands Carnage because they just came. Oh, wonderful. There you go. They just arrived at the store, but Scott, the author, Scott Graham, fortunately has one. And Scott, hold it a little closer to the screen because it's a pretty beautiful cover.
It is a gorgeous cover, isn't it? Yeah.
It really is. Yeah, I like both of yours. And interestingly enough, I was just in Canyonlands National Park in August, so give us something to talk about. So I apologize to those of you who might have been waiting. We had a little difficulty getting Zoom onto Facebook due to updates and other strange technological incidents that seem to arise when we're doing this. But anyway, hopefully we're okay now. We do have autographed copies of Striking Range that have come to the store. And Margaret has a long following, big following. So for those of you who've read the earlier books in this wonderful series, we have now a new autographed copy for you. So guys, it seems to be what you really have in common, among other things, is that you both live in Colorado.
Yes.
So Margaret, in a kind of community that you write about. Scott, you live in Durango, is that right?
That is correct. Yep.
Yeah, which is one of my favorite places, and which is the terminus of the Silverton Railway. So if you go to Durango, then you are able to take one of the truly great train trips from Durango to Silverton. The first hour going up the Animas River Valley is just so, but it gets really fabulous when you get up and it goes through territory you can't access by car as you get to Silverton. So it's really it's a wonderful thing. I've taken it, I think, 3 times maybe. It's always different, always interesting. But you're really interested in national parks, and you've got, let's see, we started in the Grand Canyon, Scott, and we have done Yellowstone and Yosemite, and in Colorado, Mesa Verde. And then in Utah, you've done the Arches and now Canyonlands. And you have a wealth of parks to go that are accessible. You've got Zion, you've got Bryce, you've got Escalante. And in Gunnison, you've got the Black Canyon, which I only discovered a couple of years ago, which I think is absolutely magnificent.
It is a wonderful place. And, another one that would make for, it seems like I'm always going to these national parks nowadays. And I wanted to write about national parks because I love national parks. And I wanted to share the value, the wonderment of national parks with a wider audience. But now I go to the national parks and all I do is look around for ways to kill people when I'm at the national parks. Well,
and they've had a bump with the Grand Canyon too. So, but you've already done that one. But I saw statistics the other day of how many people have died in the canyon this year. And it's quite high. Well, most of it's because people don't have proper respect for the canyon and Absolutely. They go marching in. They fall off the edge, or they go down inside and then they can't conveniently get out again if you don't have enough water and food and so forth. But deaths in national parks have always been a problem. People not respecting nature, death by Alaska, as my friend Dana says, which basically means a bear got you, But you've got an archaeologist called Chuck Bender who gets himself into all kinds of trouble. So we'll come back to him, but let's talk to Margaret because you're writing about a specific part of Colorado. Margaret, why did you decide to create Timber Creek?
Well, it was really inspired by where I grew up, which was Saguache, Colorado. And it's in the San Luis Valley. That particular little town is surrounded by mountains, but not by forest. So I did decide to go ahead and make up a fictional place so that I could play with the geography a little bit and surround Timber Creek with lots of forest. And so it's right there on the edge of wilderness area, and all kinds of things can happen in those dense mountains. So yes, that's why I decided to create Timber Creek. However, because of my experience growing up in a real small town, and Saguache is a very small town in Colorado, I did have lots of details that I could fill Timber Creek with from my past. And so that's kind of how it was born.
Well, you couldn't really call it Timber Creek if it didn't have forest access. So I'm
I
happy
sure
that
couldn't.
you did that. And it does make a wonderful setting for the books because you've got a canine unit. I love they're actually called Timber Creek Canine Mystery. I can't believe how many times I looked at canine and it never dawned on me what
Oh,
it
really?
actually stood for. I felt so stupid, but one day I went, oh look, it's really canine.
Well, that just shows that you haven't had a whole lot of contact with law enforcement in canine units.
Clearly not. I mean, it's one of those really for dumb moments, that occasionally can overcome you. So I have found one of the great advantages of getting old is you don't really mind admitting how stupid you could be. When you're young, it's all a big cover up because you don't want to lose face or have anybody laugh at you. When you get old, you know that everybody really shares your plot,
I
your
know.
experience, and you can kind of laugh at it. But anyway, so tell us a little bit about Maddie and the canine unit, and then we'll go back and talk to Scott about Chuck Bender, archaeologist.
Well, even though there are 7 books in the series now, the time span of those 7 books is really only about a year and a half, which I had to do since Robo's lifespan is not going to be as long as a human lifespan. So I had to really, make the time slow down quite a bit for the books. But Robo and Maddie have been together now about a year and a half, because in the first book in the series, they're a newly minted team. And so now with book 7, they are getting to where they understand each other more, they trust each other more, and they're best friends. So Maddie has had a lot of baggage throughout the series from her past, and she is working through that with counseling and also learning to trust her canine partner. And one of the things I think is important to bring out is that human-animal bond and how animals can help us get over some of the socialization issues we have. Maddie is a loner in book 1, and by book 7, she has a whole host of friends. And a lot of that has occurred just because of Robo. So yeah, that's Maddie and Robo in a nutshell.
Well, I've also found that small communities, especially small mountain communities, people tend to band together. We are now the proud owner of 2 mining claims at 10,800 feet above Pitkin, Colorado, which belong to our recently deceased brother-in-law, in which our younger daughter and her husband went up to clean up this summer. They were going to get it ready to sell the cabin, and absolutely have fallen in love with the community and so forth. So they had wanted a summer home to get away from the Phoenix heat for a long time. So basically, we're now going to own Colorado property until the kids work out whether, how they want to deal with it. Anyway, it's gorgeous up there, and it's a beautiful drive from Pitkin. You go down this little windy road through a small valley, and then you turn right and go to Gunnison. And then if you leave Gunnison and go just a little bit, well, actually, you don't even leave Gunnison. You go straight north to Crested Butte, where we got for the first time this summer. And Peter Heller has just written a really interesting book called The Guide. And part of that takes place in Crested Butte. So I enjoyed reading it because here it was right in front of me. So, it's a wonderful part of Colorado. Where would Timber Creek be in theory in comparison to like Gunnison and Pitkin?
Actually farther south, because I imagine that country closer to Durango, where Scott lives.
Okay.
So I kind of imagine it similar to Pagosa Springs and maybe the little mining town of Creed and South Fork, kind of in that area, which was just south and west from Saguache. But Gunnison is north and west from Saguache, and I spent some of my teen years skiing there at Crested Butte, so I know what you're talking about. And Pitkin is really high country. Oh my goodness, you can get altitude sickness going from lower altitudes to something up around 10,000 feet.
I was mulling over the fact that as I'm sitting there at 10,800 feet having dinner, then I am 2,000 feet higher than I was in Machu Picchu, where I was taking altitude pills in order not to get altitude sickness in Peru. And I thought, I don't think the air's any really different in Colorado than it is in Peru. So why am I not taking pills? But anyway, went down, slept in Gunnison because I thought, you come down to, I think it's like 8,000 feet. Probably not quite so scary. So Scott, are you a longtime resident of Durango? Are you a native Coloradan?
I am as close to a native as can be. I came to Durango when I was an elementary school kid, and actually worked my way through college on the Durango Silverton narrow gauge railroad. So, but I've got you beat by a few hundred times in terms of how many times I've gone up and down that train ride. And I'll tell you what, I agree with you. It never is boring. It's just a beautiful ride. And likewise, it takes you high. You get up at the end of that train ride, you're in Silverton, Colorado, 9,300 feet. And there are a lot of people who get off that train at lunchtime who have flown into Durango and jumped on that train from sea level, and they can barely walk. So I know what you're talking about as far as when you go up to places like Pitkin County or Timber Creek. And I don't know, Margaret, if you've used any sort of altitude sickness in any of your stories yet, but there's an idea.
There's an idea, isn't there?
Right.
You could always spike altitude pills or, do terrible things too. We went to it from Santa Fe where we'd been for 2 weeks. So at least we'd been at 7,000 feet because Phoenix is so low. It would have been, much too dramatic. So Durango has a truly fabulous bookstore, which recently got saved, called Maria's, which I have always loved. And if you happen to be in Durango, I definitely recommend that you drop in at Maria. My mother used to love staying. There's some kind of a big inn right at the outside town where the river flows past it. I can't remember what it used to be called. It's probably
the Doubletree is what it's called now. It was the Red Lion back in the day. So
okay, yeah, I know it wasn't a Doubletree, but it was fun. And there, the Animas River was burbling along, and it's a gorgeous part of Colorado. But Chuck Bender, why is he an archaeologist? What made you decide to give Chuck that profession?
Well, Durango and the environs are kind of archaeological central for a lot of people. There are a lot of archaeologists here. Like we said, I grew up here, have always had that interest in archaeology. Essentially, Nevada Bar, with a wonderful series of national park books, had already taken the ranger who moves from park to park. Number one, and number two, I wanted someone beyond just a ranger. I don't have a real law enforcement background, and I really wanted to go into that amateur sleuth side of mystery storytelling. And yet I also wanted a person who had a real strong reason to be in these parks and to have a through line of archaeology at each park, because all these parks are really based in the past, whether they're a geologic past or a human past. All of our national parks, when you really sit down and look at them, it's the past that you're looking at, and it's the past that you're kind of reveling in. And archaeology is all about that. So it gave me an opportunity with my character to really be thinking about the past and then bringing stories through to the present. So in Chuck's case, he's an archaeologist who goes from park to park to do contract work. And then there's the mystery that develops while he is there. He's got his family unit who are involved as well. I've brought his wife, Janelle, into the stories more and more. Unlike Margaret, my books have moved forward a year at a time in kind of traditional time with the books coming out each year. So I started the series with a couple of precocious young adolescents, daughters for Chuck, who he had just gotten married to Janelle. Young daughters, he's a long-time bachelor trying to figure out how to be a parent all of a sudden after being very settled as an archaeologist and going around having his own life. Those girls have gotten year by year older to where now they're precocious teenagers. And Chuck is still just trying to keep up and figure out how do I maintain myself as a stepdad to these girls who are just kind of outpacing him at every turn. And that was some of what I was playing with in the new book, Canyonlands Carnage. You've got the girls, as they're known, Rosie and Carmelita, the older daughter, who are playing more and more role in these stories, almost by force of nature. And Chuck is in the meantime supposed to be the protagonist, but I'm writing these stories and I'm like, well, these girls, they've really got minds of their own now. And it's been really fun to kind of let them become part of the story. And for me, as a person who was a father of 2 sons, but not the father of 2 daughters, to kind of imagine what it would be like to have a couple of daughters who are teenagers and be trying to have a normal life, have these murder mysteries going on, and then also be trying to deal with a couple of daughters who are quite good sleuths themselves at this point.
Well, they are. Yeah, I remember back in your first book, the Grand Canyon one, that was a somewhat rocky relationship, the whole family unit, because he was, as you say, he was a lifetime bachelor. And, I'm just going through this. I mentioned to you 2 brand new puppies, and I'd totally forgotten what it's like to have babies, starting all over again. My whole back is going out from bending over, wiping up pee and the whole bit. But, fortunately, it will pass faster with puppies than it does with babies. So it won't be quite so long. But yeah, it's interesting that when you get settled in an adult life, and you don't really, you're not raising children or puppies or whatever it is, it's a big dislocation to your life to have that happen. And I remember how well you wrote about that with Chuck, and I was worried that his family might fail, his new little family, but fortunately it has not. So Margaret, one of the interesting things in your series is the relationship between Maddie and Cole, the veterinarian. Now you're married to a veterinarian, as I know from our past conversations, so you can portray what Cole and his profession would be like. But you've had them dancing around each other now for quite a long time. Do you plan on merging them a little bit? I already know the answer because I read this book, but I'm asking Margaret. You merging them a little more firmly towards being a couple?
The readers that write to me really want that, and they want that to happen soon. And I have wanted it too, from the very beginning. And so, yes, I think Maddie and Cole are solid. And even though Cole is probably always a little bit concerned that Maddie might withdraw again, he is becoming more and more certain that they are a solid couple. And so, yeah, I enjoy having them get together more in this book. And so that has been fun. And then, speaking of puppies, Robo becomes a dad in this book too. So for people who read Hanging Falls, you met the German Shepherd Sassy in Hanging Falls and talked about at the end of that book, maybe having Sassy and Robo have a litter. And they do at the very beginning of Striking Range. Chapter 2, the puppies are born. So that was a fun chapter to write. Yes, as a veterinarian's wife, in chapter 2, Cole has to do a C-section to deliver the puppies. And boy, I have been called to help do that many a time. And actually on Christmas Day, we did an emergency C-section on a bulldog one time, and our 2 daughters were home. And one of them had brought a boyfriend, and we all trooped to the clinic and delivered puppies. And the boyfriend said that was the most memorable Christmas he had ever had.
I can well believe it. Yeah, I thought it was interesting because Martin Walker, one of my favorite authors who writes a wonderful series about Bruno, chief of police, they're set in France in the Perigord and the Dordogne. And an active part of that series is Bruno's Basset Hound, second Basset Hound, because the first one, dealing with the problem you mentioned, the first one was aging out to the point where it was becoming unrealistic. So, so she died heroically in battle, which was a very good ending for the dog. Anyway, Balzac has also just become a dad. When this book opens, they have found a lady Basset Hound, and it's actually not only, it may even be a little source of income because Basset puppies are quite valuable. But I love the fact that I've been reading about Balzac and his puppies. And then I pick up Striking Range and here's Robo again. And I'm wondering if this is a trend, parental dog mysteries are coming into play. So Scott, you're going to have to give the family a dog and puppies.
Yep, they have picked up a cat. They picked up a cat in Arches National Park, and I confess I have not had a cat myself, and so Margaret has been helping me, and you helped me a great deal with Arches in terms of, okay, how do you deal with a cat? And so I had Carmelita, one of the daughters, getting on her phone, which is of course what the kids now do. The parents are lost and the kids are just on the phone saying, Dad, this is what you do. And so I had Carmelita basically channeling Margaret, who was telling me how to care for a cat when I was writing Arch's Enemy. And now I'm, continuing the cat thing so far. My problem is I've got them going off to these different national parks. I don't know how you bring a dog along to the national parks if you don't have the excuse of it being a canine, right?
Right.
But I'll think about that.
Yeah, no, that certainly would be more of a difficulty. So tell us, Scott, why did you pick? Arches is right above or adjacent to Moab, Utah, or you come out of the Colorado Thruway. If you're driving across 70 West, there's a really beautiful road that drops down, goes through it's actually the Colorado Riverway. I keep calling it Thruway, the Colorado Riverway, which is absolutely gorgeous. It's almost like driving through the Grand Canyon on a smaller basis. It's because the Colorado is flowing along. It's just amazing. And you come to Moab, but right when you get to the intersection where you turn south to Moab, you can just turn right, and you're right in Arches National Park,
right?
Which you can drive all along to. So I just did that, which was fun after reading your book, last year's book, the Arches book. But then as you drive south from Moab, Canyonlands is over on the western side. So did you pick them because they were adjacent to each other? Why did you go from Arches to Canyonlands?
Sure, actually, adjacent but entirely different from one another in terms of their accessibility. Arches is wonderful because you can just, bam, you're in your motel room in Moab, and an hour later you're in the heart of the beauty that is Arches. Canyonlands is especially what I'm writing about in the book, which is a river rafting trip down Cataract Canyon, which is in the heart of Canyonlands National Park. That area, Cataract Canyon, and then the other area, the other portion of the park that I write about and that much of the action takes place in, which is the Maze district of Canyonlands, are really two of the most inaccessible parts of the lower 48 of America. And yet they're also the most remarkable in terms of their beauty and in terms of their geological, the geology of that area is just remarkable as well. It's a place that's really hard for people to see, but a place that I've been fortunate to raft through and to visit. So I basically just wanted to share this wonderful place with my readers, kind of almost flip side from Arches to this place that almost entirely, I recognize that my readership isn't going to be able to go there, but I've been fortunate to kind of row through there, through that Whitewater. And then I wanted to share the thrill of a river rafting trip with my readers. And then also the ability, the last time I rode through Cataract Canyon, I was thinking to myself, there's a lot of ways to die on a river trip. I mean, that's part of the thrill of a river trip, of course. But I started thinking, and it would be really easy to start killing off people if there was some skullduggery going on during the already dangerous aspect of a Whitewater trip. So I started thinking about the different ways I could do that. And that was another piece that said to me, Whitewater River journey down Cataract Canyon. Again, kind of that closed room sort of a murder mystery along the lines of, and then there were none, the classic Agatha Christie. So they're down in this canyon. There's no cell phone service. Bad things begin to happen, and everybody starts looking around the circle at the people that are on this river trip, and they know that it's someone in this group here. There isn't anyone coming in from the outside. And so I loved the idea of trying a closed room mystery as well, but setting it in the outdoors as opposed to the mansion that's been cut off because of the big storm and the flood or whatever. And so all those pieces together are what convinced me that Canyonlands would be a fun place to set a story way back in the wilderness. And of course, the name Canyonlands Carnage comes from the fact that when you're whitewater rafting and a raft flips and upsets in the rapids, gear goes flying everywhere, passengers go flying everywhere, oars go flying everywhere. And in the Whitewater community, that's known as carnage. You've now had rapids or Whitewater carnage. And so then, of course, the alliterative name of Canyonlands Carnage was wonderful to play with as well. And so basically, I wanted to share with my readers the river rafting trip, the amazingness that is Canyonlands National Park, and then just have a real fun mystery set in that setting.
Well, you did have a remarkable open. I mean, I think that your description of the trip that Chuck and the party you're making down the rapids is really exciting and vibrant. And of course, you're a mystery reader, so you're braced for the fact that something will go wrong for somebody. Otherwise, why are we here? But I do like that idea that it's basically Agatha Christie does the Southwest. Because you're right. I mean, basically, what happens that you need to be in a place where only a limited number of people are, in order to limit the number of suspects. So it's that classic kind of, enclosed community that is a country house, or it's Murder on the Nile, or it's Death on the Nile, or Murder on the Orient Express, or whatever. And yeah, I think it's a lovely juxtaposition, because Canyonlands is so wild and rugged. And yet, on the other hand, you do have a golden age British kind of, design for the murder. So that part's great. Margaret, I wish we could really talk about your whole book, because I think your plot is fascinating, but if we say much about it, we'll absolutely ruin the reading experience. Let me just talk around it. What interested you in this particular subject? Is it something you've run across through your husband's practice in any way? Or did you just make it up because you have a fiendish mind, or what?
Yes. I'm interested in that particular drug because it has become a real problem for law enforcement officers and their canines. And canines have been killed with it. So even the very act itself of detecting narcotics has become very dangerous. And so canine officers are now carrying the antidote. And so I wanted to use that drug as a murder weapon, as well as a potential weapon against Robo's nose and against Robo. So that's how the drug got put into the book. But I also wanted to use the theme of babies, and maybe that's a little foreshadowing for future books.
Well, that's very true.
Maybe. But that theme of babies is in there too, and it starts with the puppies. And so, yes, those babies are important to the plot as well. And so I kind of mingled the death weapon with the use of the babies.
So she's talking about fentanyl, and you're talking about naloxone, or however it's pronounced. How is it pronounced? I don't even know.
It's pronounced like you said it.
Naloxone, okay. Which is what cops and so forth carry to, if they run into overdose cases, EMTs have it and so forth. But I hadn't really thought about it in terms of how dangerous it was for a working animal doing narcotics, because fentanyl is so rapid. And so is that the Michael Jackson drug? Isn't that what Michael Jackson died of? I think it is.
No, he died of, it's a drug used for sedation that they typically use in colonoscopies, because it's such a great drug for knocking people out. Oh, if Scott's wife was here, she could tell us.
He'd let us know.
Yes, Scott's married to a physician. So, but yeah, that was the Michael Jackson, how he died. Yeah.
Well, fentanyl is a really powerful drug and has led to lots of deaths. And unfortunately, it also has a high street value. So, and small towns are not immune. It's easy to think that drugs are just an urban problem, but in point of fact, not. And meth is actually perhaps even more of a small town problem than an urban problem, because cooking it requires space, and there's a smell and the whole bit. And so a rural setting actually is You'd think I'd actually, I mean, you'd think I do all this stuff. I only know it because I read about it. I don't have any personal experience, but that's the great thing about reading mysteries. You learn all this wonderful stuff that in the course of an ordinary life, reasonably law-abiding life would never come your way. So you can talk knowledgeably about, ways to kill people, how to deflence a body. I remember Aaron Elkins had a fabulous recipe for deflensing a body for Gideon, his, anthropological sleuth, and it involved tide. I mean, that's the key ingredient. I remember there's other things, but it involves generous quantities of the detergent Tide in order to get the flesh off bones as rapidly as possible. Now, why would I know that? But if I ever want to dispose of a body, I'm ready. Got it worked out.
You've got the recipe.
I do. Right. So back to Canyonlands carnage. Obviously, as we've already said, something goes wrong on the exciting river rafting trip. Why would Chuck be involved in detecting? Just because he was there?
Yeah, but that's the easy answer. Yeah, basically what happens is Chuck is an old river guy from, again, he had his earlier life before he became a family man. And one of the things he was into was river rafting. And the opportunity comes his way to serve as the naturalist on an expedition that's going down the canyon. And that's a position that is often filled on these commercial river rafting trips. And in this particular case, the rafting trip involves two opposing groups of people. We've got water policymakers on one side who are wanting to protect and preserve the Colorado River. And we've got kind of business executives who are involved in trying to tie up the rights to the waters of the Colorado River, who are on the other side. And they've both been kind of, by political correctness, forced to go on this river trip together, during which they are supposed to be having debates each evening and negotiations about how best to care for the waters of the Colorado River. So you've kind of, by definition, got these two opposing groups of people who go down the river together. Chuck has been hired in to be the naturalist on the trip. You also then have all of the guides who are the professionals who are actually putting on the trip. They're actually the people at the oars, the people who are the rescue kayakers to rescue people who are tossed into the waves in the rapids. And who then, take care of camp, prepare the meals. So you've kind of got these three groups of people plus Chuck. And then when the skullduggery begins to happen, it's like, oh, we've got two opposing groups of people. Might the murders, might this whole thing just be the result of them not getting along because of their water negotiations, or is it something deeper than that? So it brings in an opportunity to talk about water, both as a wonderful whitewater experience, but also as something that, as we all know now, we talk about you there in Phoenix, knowing how important it is that canal that comes from the Colorado River reaches you, so you can turn your tap on. And if somebody is able to get hold of that water before it reaches you, there's talk about that becoming worth going to war for in the future. So
I actually read somewhere a long time ago that the Third World War, if there ever is one, is going to be a war over water. And I think, there's too much water in some places that we just recently seen, and not nearly enough in others. California really needs to move to desalination because, Arizona can't do that, but the Colorado is drying up and it's not going to be able to support all of the states that depend upon it. So I mentioned the Colorado Riverway in Northeast Utah, and then it does go down through the Canyonland before it all gets to the Grand Canyon. I mean, it's easy to think of the Colorado and just the Grand Canyon. And then of course it goes down the western side of Arizona. And, used to have a real delta, but I'm not sure what shape the Colorado River Delta is right now. I think the Rio Grande is a similar problem. So, it all takes me back to the Milagro Beanfield Wars. Do you remember? That was absolutely fabulous book.
Right.
And, set in New Mexico, but basically it's a book about wars over waters and water rights. And, at the time, I'm trying to remember, was it I don't even remember who wrote it.
Is it Kingsolver? Barbara King?
Honestly don't recall.
John Nichols.
But, and it's a movie as well, but at the time it seemed, kind of quaint and not, like a New Mexico problem. It wasn't really going to to be all that powerful for the rest of us. But if you look at it now, it's a much more universal story.
It
For
is, and
sure.
I talk about in Canyonlands Carnage. I talk about that last stretch of the Colorado River, and in fact, clear back in 1920, I think it was, the governor of Arizona put a couple of gunships on the river down near Yuma because at that time California was putting in its new canal to bring water to Los Angeles. And they were taking, because California is the big, kahuna in all of this, they were taking more than their share of water, and they were telling Arizona too bad, to the point where the governor went out there and put gunships on the river and threatened to start shooting the people who were at the, opening the gate at the edge of the river on the California side. And so that, so that idea of war over water has been literally here in America for more than 100 years. And it's what led to the Colorado River Compact, which is where the states divvied up the water in 1922, 2 years later after the gunships showed up. And that compact now is falling apart because with climate change, there is less and less water flowing down the Colorado River every year. The compact promises way more water to the states than exists anymore in the Colorado River. Yeah. And so we're right back to being at each other's throats again. And that's part of what I wanted to express in the story of Canyonlands Carnage, was this fact that, we're all dependent upon this, and the pressures are real, and they're so real that you can build a murder mystery out of it.
You can. Now we can all go and watch Chinatown once again, which is an excellent, very powerful movie over this same subject of water rights. But as I say, California has a solution that the rest of us don't have, which is, desalination. And I used to go to Aruba when I lived back in Virginia, the Virginia Bar Association. We took a couple of what are called jollies, little bar meetings, to Aruba, and Aruba depends 100% on desalination. They have no natural water. So, I mean, it's perfectly possible for Los Angeles and so forth, to do that. But it's an expensive project, and California is kind of turning into a third world country as we sit here. So I don't know whether they're going to be able to work out. I'm hoping that Biden's infrastructure bill is going to be addressing questions like, who can desalinate and take some pressure off the internal rivers. So we'll see. But Margaret, up there in Timber Creek, since you're in the mountains, hopefully there's still enough snow that you're not, panicking about water deprivation. So Maddie and Robo, you've said that Maddie has a lot of trust issues. Another thing in Striking Range is that you do deal with some of Maddie's past. I mean, her personal story, and it involves a prison visit. So have you actually done a prison visit? Because you describe it really well.
Oh, I did do a prison visit, but not that particular prison that I kind of based that on. I am so fortunate to have a retired deputy sheriff who beta reads my books. And so I can usually write out the scene, and then I send it to him and he tells me what I did wrong. So I'm able to revise before the book hits print. And so he was so helpful with that prison scene. But yeah, Maddie, it opens with Maddie going to the prison to interview the man that tried to kill her in Burning Ridge, which was book 4. Yes.
Right. But she has an unresolved situation with people in her past. And, it comes up again in this book. And, I figured that at some point we might actually get to the bottom of it, but you're going to string it out, right? Over more books.
We're going to get to the bottom of it in book 8. But at least Maddie resolves what she needs to for the murder mystery in book 7. And there really isn't anything hanging there open-ended at the ending as far as that is concerned. But yes, I have plans to answer all those questions in book 8 and wrap it up for Maddie as far as finding out what really happened the night she was abducted.
Good. I think that's great. Readers, I mean, you don't want to show all your hand. You don't want to show your entire hand as a writer. If you're going to write a series, you want to kind of show some and then more and keep the reader going, kind of like the Perils of Pauline, but not chapter to chapter, but book to book. But at some point, I think that for readers' sake, you do have to kind of get to the bottom of one plot thread, and then you start another one. See how that goes.
Well, Scott has given me inspiration to be able to keep Maddie and Cole together. I have had people say to me, well, whenever your characters get together, it's the kiss of death. But I have found that that's not really true. And certainly there are lots of areas of conflict in families that you can bring out, even if mom and dad do love each other, and especially in a blended family. And so watching Chuck and Janelle's relationship grow over Scott's 7-book series, 7 at this point, I know he has future books in the works, has really been an inspiration to me because I love that story. I love watching those relationships grow.
Yes, I think they're an important part. I mean, a mystery really is not just about solving a crime. There always are additional strands to the story, aspects of the characters that develop and keep you interested in them in a long running series. So Scott, what do you have a national park picked out for book 8?
Absolutely, right in your backyard. It's Saguaro National Park.
Oh,
Right, well, basically on both sides of Tucson. And so the title of the book is Saguaro Sanction. And again, it's exactly what Margaret is saying, that I have really enjoyed developing the relationship of Chuck and Janelle, and really in the last 2 books, in Mesa Verde Victim, last year's book, where it was set a lot in my hometown here in Durango, and then in Mesa Verde National Park near Durango, and then also in Canyonlands Carnage, they've really found a good place with their relationship, and so exactly as Margaret said, you can create a lot of problems in a relationship without them, without the cracks being relationship ending. And in Saguaro Sanction, that's what basically happens, is that I've brought Janelle in more and more, and we've learned that she's a real force of nature in her own right. She's become she's gone to school, she's become a paramedic. She's just, I really like her as a person. And now she's taken the reins a little bit in Saguaro Sanction to a degree that creates real problems for Chuck as well. And so all revolving around the immigration issue and migrants who are coming across the border using these water stations that are now set out in the desert by groups like Humane Borders. And so Janelle, who has family in Mexico, is involved in one of those situations. And it's all within the borders of Saguaro National Park, but in a way that's, I hope, very real and also very stressful for that relationship.
Wow. Well, it's so encouraging for you readers to know that each author is producing another book for next year. Do you have questions, either one of you, would like to ask each other? And here comes PK to see if we have any reader questions, but I didn't give you a chance. Margaret, is there anything you want to ask Scott?
Well, I love the fact that you just continuously come up with these national park tours for me. And I also love the fact that I don't have to go on a raft down Canyonlands in the Colorado River, and I can still enjoy the trip. I know you always go to these parks to experience them before you start writing. How many trips do you try to make into the parks, and what kind of research are you doing there?
Well, my wife and I are real national park aficionados. I mean, we've kind of visited the parks of the West time and time again. But so pretty much every park that I've written about is a park that I have visited and been in several times. And we tend to do the backcountry stuff, and that is way in the backcountry. And so I've made a point of trying to bring that backcountry experience to my readers. Before I write each book, however, I will go specifically to that park, even if it's a park I'm very familiar with, and I'll just spend a few days. Just came back from Saguaro National Park at the beginning of the start to the writing the Saguaro book. Had this wonderful time down in Tucson, and it's only when I've learned it's only when you're right there that then you begin your writing, that you can really bring forward the smells, the textures, the feel of that place. Google Earth will only take you so far. So I will go and spend about a week at each park right before I begin writing that park. And very, very specifically, that's why working with Torrey House Press, we decided to call this the National Park Mystery Series, because we wanted each park to almost play its own role as a character in each of the stories. And so I appreciate hearing that you feel like I've kind of met your expectation of getting to know each park, because that to me is been kind of game one as far as writing this series is letting people see these parks, letting them see these backcountry aspects of the park, and then hopefully having a really fun, entertaining time helping solve the mystery as we go through that park.
Yeah.
So Scott, do you have a question for Margaret?
Likewise, I mean, to me, what is beautiful about Margaret is the way she has developed Maddie as a character over time. And what I remember way back, and I just want to know if this is what I'm remembering correctly, you were very, very specific about how you created Maddie and some of your other characters. I recall that you actually used some sort of a personality test to develop who Maddie was going to be. And I honestly think this is part of why your series has been so incredibly successful, is because you didn't just kind of begin writing this person. You sat down and you created a person in Maddie who had really difficulties that she's been working to overcome. And the result of it is that, to me, she is a real person. I mean, I can see Maddie in my mind. I can think about her and be in her head with absolute ease. And I'm wondering, what did you do early on that enabled you to have Maddie? Because I remember it was something you were really, really strategic about.
Well, thank you. Yes, I decided to take Cole and Maddie. And when I did my character profile on those two, I decided to use the Enneagram and assign them a personality type. And the Enneagram is an ancient Sufi personality typing system. And it was so much fun, because then I used my books on the Enneagram to make lists and lists of different characteristics for their personality types. So I assigned Maddie a type 1, which is the perfectionist. And it was interesting as I researched that to see that a lot of type 1s do go into law enforcement, because they have a very secure sense of justice and right and wrong. And so Maddie is the perfectionist. She is, she strongly uses those characteristics. And my goal was to be able to put them in any scene, in any situation, get into their heads and know how they would react. And then Cole is a type 8 on the system, which is also called the boss. And his primary world view is that he has to protect people and make them safe and give make a safe place, especially for his family. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that he'll spend a lot of time with his family, but it's his job to be the provider for his family. So that worked very well in the opening of Killing Trail, was to give him that kind of worldview. But it also puts him in conflict, because he can't make Maddie safe. She is a law enforcement officer. And so even though that has created some conflict between the two in previous books, they've been working through that. And she's pretty much told Cole, sorry, but you can't interfere in this. I have to follow these cases to the end. And so he basically, one of the things he's done is he's joined the sheriff's posse so that he can kind of be there more with Maddie, which again takes him away from his kids. So Cole's always torn about that. But thanks for bringing that up. I love teaching the Enneagram for writers. It's a great tool.
That's fascinating. Why have I never thought of, I've never even heard of that before. Wonderful.
Yeah, it's a fun thing to study. I learned about it when I was working in a corporation, and we used it for team building.
Gotcha. All right. Well, PK, you're back. So I know Margaret is a writer that you have always enjoyed.
Absolutely.
When she's been to the store, you're always happy. He is,
Oh,
he is
Absolutely.
the-
I'm a fan actually of both of your work. So
Yep.
first of all, thank you very much. I got to interview you both a few years ago, and it was a real
right.
highlight. I enjoyed that one an awful lot. So
Hey, Gay,
Scott,
ask them, I'm gonna go get a puppy. I'll be right back, because I think we should have a puppy on this program. But while
Absolutely.
I'm gone, if we have reader questions, you can ask them.
absolutely. So Scott, first of all, is today your birthday?
Yes, it is. Today is my birthday.
Okay, because we got a few comments, people wishing you a very warm, happy birthday. Wendy Jones and Pat Stodge both announcing your birthday here. So hopefully you get cake or some sort of fun festivities.
Well, I'll tell you what,
evening.
there's no more fun than being on Poison Pen for your birthday. I gotta tell you that. No, and you know, we can't hide our birthdays anymore with Facebook, right? There is no hiding anymore. So you better just embrace it. And that's what I've been doing all day.
It's the best tool for the FBI. They don't need to do background checks. They just need to look at your Facebook profile.
Your Facebook, yeah, exactly.
So this question is a little bit more geared towards Margaret. And Margaret, this is from Pat Stodge, and she wants to know what made you decide to focus and write on a canine partnership.
Well, to begin with, I was focused on writing about a veterinarian. I thought the vet was the interesting character because whenever my husband goes anywhere to work, people just come out of the woodwork to watch him. And I thought, hey, maybe readers would like to watch a vet work too. So I was determined to put a vet in. And then I started thinking, okay, is my vet going to be an amateur sleuth? How is he going to be pulled into murder mysteries? Oh dear, there's the puppy.
Look at that.
Oh,
Adorable.
just
Come on, Scoot,
adorable.
look at the screen. No.
So
What's
soft.
with you? What is with you? You're just decided not to. There. Come on, you've got such a cute face. There it is.
Beautiful.
So soft. Oh, very adorable, Barbara. You're going to have
Oh,
so
yeah.
much fun with them.
He's kind of
Yeah.
a sleepy boy. All right, I'll go put him back. I just thought you'd like to say hi.
Oh, we do. Thank you. So getting back to Maddie. So in trying to decide how Cole was going to get pulled into murders, vets solve a lot of medical mysteries, but they don't get pulled into murders very often. So I decided, okay, it only makes sense to have a canine officer. And about at that very same time, my mother's friend's daughter moved from Washington State to Colorado. And she was retired as a canine handler in Bellingham, Washington. And I got to meet her, and she became a consultant for my books, told me many, many stories about her dog, Robo. And I asked her if I could use Robo's name in my book, and she said that'd be great. So she's been just very valuable in helping me with the books. And then a client of my husband's is a canine trainer at that time. And he invited me to shadow him while he was training various officers. And so it all just kind of worked out. And I was lucky. And then on top of it, when I was in my 30s, my husband and I did decide to train a couple of our dogs in search and rescue. And so, of course, all that training of nose work and tracking and trailing has really been invaluable with the series too. I had no idea 30 years ago that I would be writing a mystery with a canine character, but it worked out.
It has worked. Both of your topics have really worked out wonderfully. I love going back to Colorado through your books, which, you know, I grew up there. I miss it. I miss the 4 seasons sometimes. I don't always miss all the snow. Linda Getz happened to mention that Heather Hansman's Downriver, and I've got to say that Mark Reisner's Cadillac Desert are both really great books about water conservation and water usage in the West. So that was just a shout out from one of our clients, our not clients, one of our listeners. And then a question to both of you. Marilee Smith says that her book club reads one Colorado mystery per year. So she's wondering who else would you recommend that's set in Colorado? And what are you both reading currently?
I'll go. I'll jump in there and
Okay.
sure, and I'll talk about Mickey Browning, who was kind enough to do a beautiful cover blurb for my book. And she's got a new series. So she was writing out of Florida, but she was a detective in Durango, Colorado, with the Durango Police Department here locally. And after having written more of kind of the lighter mysteries, she's now started a wonderful mystery series for which her first book just won the Colorado Book Award. And I'm trying to remember the name of the detective that the series is named for, but the author is Mickey Browning. The first book last year was trying to remember. The new one coming out though, that's getting all kinds of great reviews in October, is Mercy Creek. But the series is set in a fictional town, Echo Valley, that is basically Durango. She's fictionalized Durango in order to take the liberties in the same way that Margaret has. But Mickey is she's just a wonderful writer, and she captures Colorado, small town Colorado mountain living, and then small town police work, because she is a retired detective herself, exceptionally well. And their police procedurals that you're right there. I mean, she knows what she's talking about because she did it for her entire career. And so her books, Mickey Browning, I would recommend for those folks looking for a Colorado mystery that kind of ticks all the boxes as far as I'm concerned.
It's actually M.E. Browning, and it's Joe Wyatt is the detective, and the book is called Mercy Creek. And let me see if there are additional ones. I think there are. Shadow Ridge and Mercy Creek, I guess, are the two at the moment.
Shadow Ridge was the one that came out last year, won the Colorado Book Award right out of the blocks, and then Mercy Creek is set to come out in October and is already getting lots of talk.
Wonderful. And don't forget Peter Heller, who I think is an amazing writer. He wrote a book called The River, the new book. We're having autographed copies arriving almost any moment. It's called The Guide. And while it's not about water conservation, it's a magnificent portrait of fishing on a river that comes down past Crested Butte and towards Gunnison, a private fishing lodge. It actually has, I have to say, sorry, Peter, kind of ridiculous plot, but that's not really the point. Well, it just does. I mean, you have to go with it. But the writing about the river and about, fishing and about water, I sent a copy to CJ Box, who's the penultimate fisherman that I know. Well, no, not penultimate. What's the word I want? Anyway, the most enthusiastic fisherman that I know. So those are two great books. Margaret, do you have one you want to recommend?
I'm going to quickly recommend two. One is a series of 5 books by Mark Stevens that are set in the kind of on the western slope of Colorado, and typically talks about some environmental issues, and they're really good books. And then there's a new author coming. Her name is Kathleen Donnelly, and her books involve a canine character, and they're set in the forests of Colorado. So if people like my books, I think that they'll like Kathleen Donnelly's books. Watch for those. I think it's going to be June of 2022 that her book is going to come out, and it's called Chasing Justice. So I'll give that one a shout out. And then they asked what we're reading right now. I am finally getting to read the book Winter Counts by David Heska Wanbley Wyden. And I'm kind of late because that book is very popular, but I've had a lot that I've had to read. So I'm finally getting to read Winter Counts.
It just won the McCavity Award, I think.
That's right.
Best first novel. Do I have that right? Yeah.
That's right.
We did a wonderful event with him last September. In point of fact, when it came out, William Kent Kruger joined me because they have a lot of things that they both write about that made it an interesting discussion. But David is a real talent. Anything else, PK?
You know, some really enthusiastic thumbs up from everybody. Our audience is really, really passionate about your books, both of yours. And
Thank
one of the
you.
great things about doing a combined event is it sounds like a few people are going to pick up either Scott or Margaret after this. So this is a lot of fun. This is one of the
It
reasons.
is fun. And Margaret backlist, except I think for her first book at the moment, the 6 books are available. Do I have this right, Margaret, in paperback? Although it may be a bit slow.
Right.
Scott's books are a little shakier. One of them, Scott, at the moment, is being reprinted or something, but the supply side is a little bit more difficult from Scott's publisher, but we can do it. And I think they're wonderful. I've read them both in real time, which is one of the advantages of being a bookseller, is you can start with the first book, and then you just read your way along, which is great. But I will say that particularly Scott's books, you could read any one of them. You don't need to have read any one of them in order to enjoy whichever one you pick up. With Margaret's, there is backstory. I mean, each book is an individual mystery, but I would recommend trying to read her in order if you haven't yet run across her books, just because there's continuous character development that you would miss if you picked up a later book, and then you would lose some of the suspense of some of the earlier books, right? Anyway, what a pleasure it's been to talk to both of you. Thank you so much. I'm sorry we couldn't do it in person as we have before, but maybe next year we'll have more luck, right?
Yes,
Absolutely.
thank you.
Definitely with an Arizona book, Scott. I mean, I think the saguaro, we have this magnificent saguaro that we replanted from our backyard to our front, and it's like 20 feet tall now. We were really panicked in the recent storm that it would be vulnerable, but it's held up there. They are such incredible structures, you know, physical structures. They're so awe-inspiring and resilient. Even in one of the bad fires we had on the backside of Scottsdale, where everything else burned, the saguaro largely survived. I mean, some of them are all black and whatever, but they have an amazingly tough structure, and just a great cactus.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. Fun to have been in Saguaro National Park in my mind now for the last few months, just soaking in that world that you live in day after day. It's just so
Well,
beautiful.
and in the summer, we're wishing that we were in Colorado. So it's only
Right.
fair that we do it that way. Anyway, thank you both very much for joining us. Pat, thank you for hosting it.
Thank you.
And I want to wish everybody a very happy Labor Day weekend that's watching. And we'll see you next week because we have a whole bunch of events planned. Good night, everybody. Hello. We hope you're enjoying our programs and podcasts with authors. We'd like to expand them, and your help would be appreciated. Please make a donation at poisonedpenfoundation.org. 100% of the proceeds will go to help connect authors with readers in this difficult time. Thank you.